Welcome to another episode of Project Creation. I'm Plate,
I'm Xillin.
and today we're talking about tanks. Hey man, how's it going?
Doing pretty good, man. Yourself?
Good, back for another episode. Talking
Yeah.
about the best class. No, my favorite class though. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, tanks and Ashes of Creation. There's a little lore piece I want to read for you guys out there. That I got off the wiki. That was pretty good. I thought of explaining just a little detail of kind of what the tank is all about. If you guys don't know what tanks are in MMOs, if you're new out there or anything, but here we go. Protection, command, execution. Tanks act as a shield for themselves and their party, altering the battlefield to execute their strategy. A mastery of focus and control allows tanks to achieve their primary goals, helping their team mitigate incoming damage and dictating who stands in the line of fire. As a tank sharpens their skills and leans to steel themselves against danger, they will find their strength growing in a variety of ways. All right. So what do you think on that alone?
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good way of describing how tanks function in most MMOs. That's generally the way it's done. And of course, I have 150 thoughts on that topic alone, so I'm sure we'll get to it at some point in this podcast.
Yeah, I like that little narrative,
Before tanks were tanks, and I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say more specifically before the Trinity, because World of Warcraft was really the first game that really had the true Trinity. We have tanks, we have healers, and we have DPS. They're separate from one another. They each perform different functions, and this is how we're going to live life. And so go all the way back to Dark Age of Camelot, which was an MMO in about 2002-ish. They had a class called an Armsman, and they didn't have any special abilities. There's no magic. There's no, I guess they had a crossbow, so you could go ranged, but that was just to pull things to you. Right. That's all that really accomplished. And you're just a big hulking monster that could live longer than people. And before they even were separated like that in combat, let's say it was going badly, I would stick around and use my abilities that generated threat to get everything on me so that I would die, so that everyone else could run away and not die themselves. And I took that as like the tank's responsibility is you die before anybody else. So yeah. And then of course I got into the hardcore raiding and tanking on elite raid teams and stuff later on. So yeah, I've been doing the tank life for nearly 20 years.
Yeah, man. I've been probably the first. So I came from EQ, as you know, many of you guys that do know. And EQ was probably one of the first games that had implemented that. And then WoW came second. But I mean,
okay,
yeah. But dude, like tank, like your role was your role. You didn't blur the lines. If you tanks can't heal, tanks can't DPS. And that's like part of my frustration with a little bit of tanks is not being able to do some damage, but. Later in MMOs, it's changed a lot. But yeah, I remember rolling a warrior in EQ, dude, and like the whole time, all you could do is kick. You could kick the mob, and then you had a snap taunt, and that's it. You had taunt and kicking the mob, but that's what you needed to do your job, pretty much,
Right. Just hold the aggro.
Yeah, and I even want to say that it's gone even back to D&D, like the whole idea of tanking. Or like a barbarian or a big type of warrior guy that can take damage over a wizard type, because
right,
like it was just the idea of wizards not even being able to. They were soft, like you wore robes traditionally.
They're squishy, right?
You weren't armed for battle. You weren't looked at as somebody that can, are war type, and even have the sword skills. So I mean, that just I feel comes hand in hand with history, and really, gladiatorial, even back in Roman times or even before that, in biblical times. But I think the tank's been around for a long time in and outside of video games, but
well, sort of.
Yeah,
I like the tank doesn't actually make sense.
It doesn't. No,
But,
it doesn't.
Okay, so like if you think about the word tank, it comes from a tank. The big hulking machinery that we drive around and
Right.
and hurt people with in war.
Yeah, I wonder when that started. That's such
I don't know.
Such a random word for it.
And it is a random word. And the thing about a tank, a real tank, is that yes, it's armored. And yes, it takes a lot to take one out, but it's got a big freaking cannon on it, and it can do a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with these MMOs and these video games, what they've done is they've, a friend of mine and I have always made this joke. They call the DPS glass cannons. So they're cannons, but they're made of glass. Mm-hmm. So we've always said that tanks are titanium pea shooters. That's always been
22, shooting rabbits out back.
22. And so in MMOs specifically, but just video games in general, the idea of the tank is that he draws the aggro, so you want to kill him because he's drawing the aggro. But it's like, if there was somebody out there that wasn't doing any damage, you would ignore that guy and go kill the guys that are doing the damage.
Right. That are pissing you off,
Yes. So from that perspective, the tank doesn't actually make a lot of sense. And I've actually, there's a mobile game that's a really popular mobile game called Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes.
Yeah, I've played that. That's actually pretty fun. Yeah. It is pretty fun.
And so I mean, I'm like deep into that game. I've been playing it since pretty much it launched. I have a really high level account, like all that stuff. And one of the things I found really interesting that they have done over time is not every tank class even has a taunt, let alone like that you're forced to attack them, like taunts have in MMOs.
Right.
There's a class that if you don't attack them, then pretty soon he levels up basically because he's not being attacked. And so then he becomes a monster. And there's different, they found different ways to make tanks be threats on the field without them just ripping apart the other team. And so I would like to see if there's a way to implement that in MMOs in general, because I mean, you're talking about a turn-based game versus a live-action game.
Yeah, so it's a lot different,
a lot different. But I almost feel like if you're making a PvP game, like a Guild Wars 2, for example,
right,
or something else that's like, yeah, we have PvE, but we don't really care about that. We're not about that life. This is a PvP game. That's where Arcade is a good example of a game.
Yep.
I almost feel like they should make the tanks be monsters. Like they should be hit like a truck.
That would make a lot of sense. That would make a lot of sense.
Because you have to have the whole threat table, and every ability generates so much threat, and it determines where you are on the threat table. You kind of have to have that for a computer boss, for an AI boss. He has to know who to attack, and he has to have some kind of a algorithmic reason to figure out who to attack.
Right.
So you kind of have to have that in PvE, and I can't think of a good way around that. But of course, there's people that are smarter than me. Maybe they'll figure out a way around it. But in PvP games, I almost feel like make some reason why you want to take the tank out. It don't got to be that he hits hard. It could be that he's giving out a buff constantly that just massively buffs the offense or defense of the entire team.
Right.
So he's got to be taken out, and then once he's taken out, then you can start taking out the other ones.
Right.
Something like that. But yeah, I mean that's you say the tank has always existed in real life, and I'm like, kind of, but.
I mean, just on the aspect of that frontline fighter type, not necessarily that frontline fighter type, but not necessarily the real reason. But I think, if anything, the real threat behind somebody like that, if you got like a dude like that in your face, I think that's a threat, But like, put to a dragon, I mean, it's not, because he's just like You know,
See, that's not a bad idea. Like the way like a tank class could just be a class that has a PBAOE, that's point blank area of range, so it comes out of you.
right?
Just for anybody who may not be familiar with MMO mechanics, but just has a constant pulsing PBAOE ability that makes it where anybody he's within, let's say melee range or maybe 5 feet or whatever, suffers a massive accuracy penalty or an offense penalty or something, so that if there's a tank near you,
Mm-hmm.
you have to get rid of him instead of
Right. Yeah.
instead of
You're
whoever
you're at a disadvantage or something like that.
Yes, if there's a tank near you, you have to switch. So that's the kind of thing you're talking about with the pressure. Like, yes, the little guy over there with the bow and arrow could kill you faster, but the big hulking monster with the two-handed hammer,
sword in front of you is probably
it's
your
right
bigger
there. You better
threat.
deal with him first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see them break up the force taunt. I push a button and you have to attack me.
I do like that though. I do like the snap taunts with it. And in order to make the class work, they needed to add that mechanic. You can't tank without a snap taunt. And many of you guys that don't know what snap taunting is, it's literally you hit a button and you make you jump to the top of the threat table by 1 usually, and then you have to continue that number to go up to stay on the top of the table. But yeah, it basically just makes you jump the line and makes the mob look going from the wizard to look at you. And it could only be a second because there could be damage coming in that fast that you need to.
Most games have it where it's like a 7-second taunt or a 10-second taunt.
Yeah.
And then after that, if you're still not at the top, you lose a threat. But not every game has that.
Right. And I think they added that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they added that just to make tanking a little bit easier.
Yeah, because it was impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you use your taunt and it by 1, and there was a wizard who hit an ability 1 second after you hit the taunt, as soon as it hits, you're done. You've already lost.
You're on cooldown.
So they had to give you a grace period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, they had to give you a grace period. And the interesting thing about snap taunts is they are necessary for hard boss fights, and they're necessary to make tanking on raids fun. Because if there's no tank swap, like there's nothing to do as a tank. You stand wherever the fight is supposed to take place, and you stand there and you look at the boss's crotch because they're always
That's
yeah.
That's that's even its own thing,
Right. And you just stand there and look at the boss's crotch for 12 minutes while the people behind you get to practice their rotations and have fun. And so
they're actually getting into it, and you can't see anything,
you're just like,
and you're just
this is boring. Yeah. I hit my taunt on cooldown.
Yeah.
That's
now,
my whole
okay,
job,
I'm gonna kick the guy now.
Maybe there's a big ability that he does that I have to use a specific cooldown to avoid or whatever. But there's really nothing to it. And so as soon as you implement tank swaps, you immediately make the boss fights A, harder, and B, way more interesting for tanks with way more to do.
Yeah, I think it gives them something to do, really,
for something to do
to make actually like concentrate on. All right, so but
won't have force taunt. That always makes me a little scared.
Yeah,
as from a rating perspective.
But with Ashes, the taunting is a lot different. We'll get into the abilities later, but the how threats built in the game for the tank, based on the abilities is a lot different, and I think Steven is a little reimaginative with that, but I don't know. I think it could go south,
Right.
Just because of how the abilities are, and if you don't build that way, can you really tank, type of thing.
Right.
So what do you like most about tanking in MMOs, would you say?
I think probably what I like best about it, and I guess this veers off into the realm of arrogance, I guess, to some degree, but you can carry a team.
Yeah, totally.
A really, really competent tank can carry people, some relatively incompetent people or less skilled people, if you want to say that. So, and it's the control factor. Like you really are controlling the battlefield, and it all starts with the tank. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say the tanks are the most important, because if the DPS can't meet the DPS checks, then you die. And if the healers can't
heal, then you die. Doesn't matter about,
but the tanks are the first ones that have to figure out the fight. Whenever your crew is doing a new fight, a new raid, a new boss, the tanks got to be the first ones to figure it out. Once they get it figured out, then everybody else can start figuring out their role, and how they're going to do their stuff. And so, as somebody who learns really quickly, I find it's my best role, because I can, within a few pulls, usually figure out, okay, this is where I need to be, and then repeat it over and over again, so that everyone else can do that. So I guess just the control factor of it is what I like about it.
Yeah, and I think to be a good tank isn't necessarily like you got the best gear, or you got, the best whatever, it's really like on the person, man. Like it's outsmarting, or just knowing where to be, like you just said, and being strategic on the battlefield, and really too commanding people, like I know a lot of guilds that they're shitty ass guilds, but their tank is like top 3 on the server, dude, and he carries them just because he knows what the hell's going on, He's like, oh, how could we fail? We got the best, we got one of the best tanks on the server. How's it gonna actually, it doesn't matter, but
and so
that's a good factor, honestly. I would say for me, the most fun thing about tanking is just being able to fucking take all the damage, and just being in that front line, and just being like, hey, you bitch, look at me, and then let's just go to bout, and it doesn't matter what anything. It's almost like, and it's weird too, because it's almost like you're a fighter in the ring, and it's just you two. Who cares about anything else? I don't really care if there's 3 guys on me. I'm going to take them all type of mentality, And I like that. I think that that's something that translates well from my personality to the actual character I play. So
that's funny that you said that. Let me ask you a question. Have you found that like there is a very high correlation between personality and what role you tend to prefer in MMO?
1,000%.
1,000%,
dude.
For 10 minutes and know what role you might like to play.
Dude, you can talk to me for 30 seconds and know what role I'm gonna play, dude. But like, and I've talked to people too, and I've gotten it way wrong. I'm like thinking, oh, dude, you're probably gonna like, you'd probably be a ranger, chill in the back, shoot a couple arrows, but like, then you get him and he's like, nah, dude, I'm the bard and I like to sing songs and all that. I'm like, what? I would never pick that, dude. But some people like to play other. That's another, I think, a big thing about MMOs too. And this is a little side topic, but people really like to also pick what they aren't, who they aren't. They like to be different. They like to not be a human. And I don't mind being a human. It is what it is. But
I usually am.
Yeah, they like to play different races just because they can be someone else alternative out of their life, and whether it's like stems back to like social issues or something bad that happened to them, and it really can come full circle with them. So, I mean, it's really on the person. But from what I found, the tanks, though, the specific people that play the tanks are all very much alike in people, like personalities.
They have a lot of similarities. They really do.
Like me and you, I can already tell we have a lot of similarities,
Right.
Apart from everybody else that's been on the show. So what type of tanks do you want to see in AoC?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them.
You just want choices just to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm about that choice life, man.
Even if it's not a good one, like even if it's like the meta is just shit on the class. And
so that one of the things, like if you were to ask me, what's the one thing about Ashes of Creation that's your absolute favorite thing? Almost everybody would say the node system, or the thing that they're looking forward to the most, because it is the game that's being built on that system. And I understand that. And that would be second for me. But number one is there's going to be 64 classes.
Yeah. I like the variety too. Yeah.
There's so much variety, and I think I mentioned this in the last episode, and if I didn't, I'll reiterate it. There ain't gonna be no class balance. You can't. I've seen
No.
balance three, like For Honor. They can't balance the three classes they have in that. How are you gonna balance four classes? It ain't gonna happen.
Right.
So don't even try.
Right.
You just give everybody the choices and the options. And Star Wars: The Old Republic is my main game that I rated in for a really long time, for nearly a decade. And so I kind of see it from that lens. And they have the Vanguard or Power Tech, which just has high natural defense. So they just the highest natural mitigation is them, and they have a few cooldowns but not many, and they have some tools, and that's that. It's a kind of a basic standard tank kit. And then you got the Shadow, which is wearing light armor. Like, they don't have heavy armor.
Yeah.
They don't have high
more evasion type.
They got this array of cooldowns that do a bunch of different things. And so you have to know what type of damage is incoming, which cooldown mitigates which type of damage. And it has stealth, and it has a whole bunch of tools. And so it's like, it's the more advanced tank class, and then the Guardian is somewhere in between on those.
Right.
And I love that variety. And then I start thinking about all the different options that are going to be available that you'll combine with the tank class for Ashes, and I'm like, there's 5 or 6 other types of tanks that I can think of that would go well. So yeah, I want all the tank types, all of them.
That's good, man. I'm glad that you're saying that, because just from my background, like I've always wanted that in MMOs. And a lot of MMOs just kind of give you like a 3 choice, to spec in, or they give you, or you're just a tank, that's it. And maybe there's some alternate advancement at the end of the tank, at the end of the level cap. But
right.
Man, I'm glad you say that, because I definitely want the same thing, and I want people to be able to really choose and to pick, because I don't think necessarily it's a bad thing to have a bunch of choices. I think it just makes the MMO more fun, and it adds a lot more replayability. Even if you just like tanks, you can play multiple different types of tanks,
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and that's one of the cool things about Ashes is, your base class will be tank. So you'll be a tank, and that's stuck. You can't change that, but you can change your secondary class. And so maybe today you feel like being a tank. So it's tank secondary and primary, and you're like, I'm just gonna be the tankiest bastard that ever walked. But then next week you're like, well, I'll be a tank fighter and carry a 2-handed sword, and so at least when I get into a fight, I can do some damage.
Right.
And you could next
or
week I'll be a
tank or
wizard.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an off. Exactly.
Right.
So the ability to switch it up and change. I don't know how often we'll be able to do it, how inconvenient it'll be to change. But the option will be there. They've confirmed that. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure that'll change too. But yeah, you're right, and I do love that they have that option, and you could do it without re-rolling your character, which is a big thing.
Exactly.
The primaries are stuck, but the secondaries you can re-roll, which is a big thing.
Yeah. Right. And so I don't know about you, because I'm an alt guy. Like,
you're altaholic.
I'll have all the alts.
I'm like one or two characters.
One or two.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to just love different choices. The choices, what I want to play today. And when I first heard 64 classes, my immediate thought was, oh my God, I would have to 64 alts. That's it's really 8 classes. You know what I mean? You can have 8 characters. And yeah, you'll probably 4 of those you'll never play.
Oh yeah, you're just gonna roll them just to run around in the starting area for an hour,
you play and you mess around with them, and yeah, maybe one day
get them
you find
to level
out
10 and that's it.
Yeah. So it's pretty fun from that perspective to have all those choices, and that's kind of, I'm excited about that part of it for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. So what would you say though to counter that? What don't you want to see out of the tanks, or that you've seen in past MMOs that kind of got messed up along the way, that transpired into something that was just awful, or if you have something, but yeah.
I have a couple little things on that. One is, and I understand the reason why this is a thing, because it's a cool concept. Is the refilling your health bar through various mechanics.
Okay.
So there are certain classes that in some games that for whatever reason they can refill their health bar. So for example, in Star Wars: The Old Republic, it's the Guardian, and they actually have like 4 mechanics. They can go from nearly dead to nearly full practically instantly and reflect damage back to you at the same time. And while that is really cool and I understand it and it fits with the lore and all that stuff, it makes it where the developers can't balance Guardians from a both PvE and PvP perspective, because if they make Guardians do a lot of damage, if they make them even with the other melee DPS classes as far as the damage scale is concerned, then they wreck PvP. They're monsters in PvP.
Well, yeah,
because
if
they
can
can
just heal,
Yeah, you just keep healing back up to refilling yourself. So Guardians have always been at like the bottom end of the DPS charts for that game because of that reason, because you can't balance. So I'm not a big fan of those any mechanic that's going to make it where it's hard to balance. But of course, we've already discussed that there ain't going to be no balance in 64 classes. So what's it matter?
True.
But I will say the one thing from the I found this a lot. It seems like there are a lot of developers out there that when they're trying to make the game harder for tanks, because you taunt and then you hold the aggro and that's it. Like on raids and high end raids, yes, it gets harder. Absolutely, no question.
Yeah, it's a different story.
Like for dungeons and running around with your friends and stuff like that, it's not hard. There's nothing to it, and so they try to make things harder. And I found that it seems like to an overwhelming degree, developers go, well, let's just make everything knock you back and knock you all over the room.
Oh, yeah. That's annoying too.
That doesn't make it harder, just makes it more annoying.
Right.
Like, can we find a way to make the game more challenging and have a little more engaging content without it being a pinball,
Right. Yeah.
That other than that, I mean, tanking's tanking. They're little picadillos, but that's just part of the nature of the beast, I think.
So mine was really, honestly, the only really pet peeve I have about tanking is them not being able to do any damage. That's like the one thing that just drives me up the wall, because as like you still need to, like, even if you're not topping the charts, I don't care to not top the charts. I just want to still do some damage to make sure I'm still effective, because like you just said, outside of taunting and controlling the mob, you're doing nothing, like at least give me damage and something to be like, yeah, let's hurt this guy. But yeah, I mean, like if Ashes doesn't bring that to the table, I will be very, very sad, but I don't really foresee that happening.
I don't think so
just on the class combinations and choices you'll have, like, so they'll be your type of tank, they'll be the evasion tank, they'll be your control tank, all that. So damage
all
tank.
That stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree with that completely. I know that for me and my teams, the raid teams that I've led over the years, one of the things we've done a lot is mixing up the gear to try to find every point of DPS we can get out of the tanks. So if we have healers that are strong enough that we don't have to be in like full mitigation armor, we're like throwing DPS pieces on. Let's throw a piece that has power on it instead of mitigation. Every little
test it. Yeah.
Little fraction of DPS that we can get. And so yes, that's kind of like I mentioned earlier, the tank fighter combo. Like that seems like that's a perfect off tank. Or even if it's a fight that's not that challenging, there's not that a healing intensive element to it. Okay, well go with your tank fighter combo. Instead of using a sword and shield, use a big ass 2-handed axe and start cleaving people. Like that makes more sense to me. Yeah, but you still have your taunt. Yeah. So that's yeah.
That makes sense. That's actually a good strategy. Yeah,
and with Star Wars: The Old Republic, a lot of people don't know this. The raiding in that game is intense. Like there are hard raids in that game, really hard raids. And people figured out how to do it with one tank instead of two. If you can find any way to mitigate the tank swap, because they generally put a tank swap in every hard fight. if you can find a way to mitigate it, or like I said, taking off the defensive stuff and putting on the offensive stuff, and getting that balance where the healer's like, okay, that's you've gone too far.
Yeah.
One more piece of defense back on and we're good. You know, finding every little fraction of DPS that you can get to beat the timers on that. So, and yeah, like I said, I think Ashes is going to have probably more ways about going about that with the different class combinations. Maybe it's wizard. Maybe you can have a tank that also flings fireballs at people. Like we don't know yet, but you know.
Yeah, could have something, or like reflect missile or something. That'd be pretty cool. I'd like to see it.
Like
yeah, I would like to see an ability like that. That's pretty common too, and that reminds me of D&D bringing it back. Is reflecting missiles back at the attacker. I mean, with like a magical something, you know, maybe you need a magical
barrier,
yeah, magical barrier, or I mean, even like your gear, you know, you got a magical shield that can reflect, you know, that's on the actual shield. So, did you have like a tank experience that you remember, you know, that you will always remember, like whether it was like in a raid or anything like that, or just tanking in general?
I have two that really stand out. The first one is before I knew what raiding was. So we're talking about
your first raid or right before
maybe a year into the launch of Star Wars: The Old Republic. Okay, so we're talking like 2011.
Okay,
I had never done a raid at that point. I'd
heard about them, but didn't do them.
I wouldn't even say heard about them. I didn't really know.
Right.
I don't know, like I'd heard about them, but like I'd played World of Warcraft to level cap and never went into a raid. I'd played
that's funny, dude.
Age of Conan to the level cap, never went into a raid. Played Warhammer Online to the level cap, never went into a raid. Played Lord of the Rings Online to the level cap, never went into a raid. Played Rift to the level cap, and never went into a raid. So I go into a story mode Flashpoint, which is a dungeon in Star Wars: The Old Republic. So 4 players, pretty short, and I'd never done that one before. And so I tell the guys, look, because I'm tank, so I want to let them know I don't know the mechanics of this, right? So I say, I've never done this before, and they say, oh no, we'll show you. And I said, all right. And so we go through and they explain each fight to me, and we boom, 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 we one shot everything. And then a little later on, after that one, they were like, hey, did you want to try that on hard mode? And I was like, no, you know, I was terrified.
Right.
They're like, no,
you got it. You just one-shotted the whole damn dungeon. Yeah.
So they get me in there and they explain, and I nailed every one of them. And there's this boss at the end where he drops this purple circle that everybody has to stay out of, and the tank's job is to like get it out of the center of the room.
Right.
And so I went along the edge and like literally made this pretty line of purple circles, and they were just like dumbfounded. They were like, I've never seen a tank do that. You know?
Yeah.
Fight, you know?
Yeah.
And so that really stood out. And then that's when they asked me to go on a raid, and I went on a raid, and it went, you know, it was 3 months later, I was leader of a raiding guild. Like,
oh
it
wow.
was like, boom,
it's
boom,
like
boom,
this dude knows what he's doing. Yeah.
But the main thing that really stands out is there is a fight in Star Wars: The Old Republic. There's a raid called Dread Fortress, and the last boss of that fight is Dreadmaster Brontis. And on Nightmare difficulty, that fight it's insane.
A nightmare. Yeah,
it is a nightmare. And my team spent about 7 million credits in repair bills, which back then that was like absurd money, amount of credits.
Yeah, that's I remember I played SWOTAR, so I mean, like, running around with 1,000 credits, I feel high and mighty, you know. But
right.
A mil, dude, 7 mil, dude.
Trying to down that fight, and when we finally did, and we were one of maybe 25 teams in the world at that point who downed that fight, you know, it wasn't a whole lot. That was a good feeling, and I did it on a class that people said you can't. You have to use the meta class, you know. And I was like, no, I've been a Vanguard forever, and I'm doing it on a Vanguard.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude. Stick to your guns, man.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I've done it. Since then I've done it on a Shadow, and it is like 3 times easier.
Yeah,
there's no question it's easier. So yeah, those two things. What about you? Do you have any that really stand out?
Well, actually, recently, so I started getting back into EQ1 when I was probably about last year. Yeah, dude, they did a revamp with the green server, the new green server. and I just rolled a warrior back like first up. Actually I rolled a druid to get him to level 50 to be able to power level my warrior, right? So I remember, so I got some decent gear, right? So I give it to my warrior, and gear in the game, there's no real level cap, I mean, on certain rating stuff there is, but I remember throwing, I forgot what weapon. I just threw like something that was like a couple tiers up of just like your basic rusty whatever, And I remember running around, dude, and in this place called Unrest, and it's like it's a mansion. And if you guys know the game and you guys know the zone, you know what's inside. But it's a haunted mansion is the zone. It's pretty witty, dude. And it's all got these ghouls and goblins and skeletons outside, and you got to open these rooms and get keys to go into different rooms of the house and stuff like that to get different drops and mobs and whatnot. But I remember, dude, I fucking went in the first floor, and it's tough. And I think I was like level 15 at the time. And I want to say it's like a 20 level zone. But dude, I was just I pulled the whole bottom floor, dude. I had about like 20 mobs on me. I died, but I mean, I was just sitting there, and you just get the newbies coming back in who are like, holy shit, dude, this dude's doing this. But I mean, I just love being that crazy tank that just tries it,
Yeah, tries the crazy stuff.
Yeah, just goes on one and just be like, is this dude for real? He's like, you're not gonna. And they're my party's telling me like, you're gonna kill us, you're gonna wipe the zone, blah blah. And I did. I trained the zone, But I didn't care, dude. I was just so excited.
You were that asshole that day, huh?
Dude, I was just I didn't even mean to train. I just thought I could do it, And I got close. I did get close. There was a couple mobs left, but yeah, man. I think tanking's probably, I know it might not always be that fun, but if you can really stretch outside that box and wow people, I think that means a lot to them,
Right. No, and one of the cool things about being a good tank is there's no limit to the to the good DPS on the server, and there's no limit to the good healers on the server. But if you're one of the good tanks on the server,
you stand out. Yeah, everybody knows.
You're one of like 12 people.
Yep. You're one. Yeah, dude. Be like, oh, that's blah blah blah.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about it in Star Wars: The Old Republic is everybody on our server knew who Xillin was.
Mm-hmm.
It was a situation where people would be like, "Hey, dude, my guild's struggling to clear X boss. Can you come in and tank it for us and show us how to do it?" And I'd go in and show them, "Oh, here's a little tricks or whatever," and basically carry them or drag them through.
Right. That's what's up, man. I think that's more enjoyable than I feel getting gear and rewards at the end,
Yeah. Gear's not a motivator for me. I don't care about the gear.
Yeah.
It's not a motivator for me at all. I want to clear the hardest bosses on the hardest difficulty faster than everybody else. That's my motivator.
That's the mentality you need. Yeah.
And the gear is secondary to that. And you want it, but it's whatever.
Yeah. I mean, plus gear comes and goes, the next expansion brings out better shit. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Don't matter. Now if it's cosmetic and it looks cool, that might motivate me.
That's a little different story, especially with Ashes, cosmetics are just a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, they've taken the cosmetic game to another level.
They needed to, dude. I've been waiting for an MMO to actually make cosmetics badass.
A big deal.
A big deal outside of. I like that it's attached to gear. We'll get into it. This is a whole nother topic for a new episode, but just with what they're doing, the skins and all that, there's just such cool art coming out about them, and it's cool that people can get them.
It's not just gear. There's skins for your house, for your caravan, for your nodes, there's skins for everything.
Right.
So it's they've really taken that it's like developers were thinking here and Intrepid's like, well, we're going to think up here about this.
Right.
We can sell skins for a lot of things that don't just got to be a sword.
Right. So. They could still make it rare too,
Absolutely.
So going back to the tanks, do you think tanks are going to be overpowered at all? From what you've seen, at least.
Well, if what we saw is any indication,
yeah.
The whole team by himself.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I don't think it's going to stay at that level.
No, I don't either.
And also, I've never watched any of those guys really try to play. So
right.
just because they develop video games doesn't mean they're good.
They're good at them. Usually they're not,
So
man. Usually developers are
it's
terrible.
Like I can tell you right now, as a person who was known as an elite tank on a server, I'm a god awful PvPer. I'm awful at it.
I'm a great PvPer. Probably not the best raid tank, but we'll see.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So the two things don't correlate, or I mean, at least not directly. They might correlate to some degree, but so yeah, it may just be that the other guys were just awful, or it may just been a class combination thing. Like they didn't have the right tools to deal with the the specific problems that guy's tank presents.
Right.
And that's one of the cool things that I think is going to be
weaknesses for sure.
In general,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a lot of games have the paper rock scissors, and it's like I don't know if you ever watch Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So they got the paper rock scissors lizard Spock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he spends a solid 2.5 minutes going, this beats this, and this beats this, and this beats this, this beats and then it ends it with, and as it always has, paper covers rock.
Yeah.
Right? Well, with 5 things, we're talking about 64.
Yeah, I know, right?
And
that's a lot for Sheldon, dude. Yeah.
So it's like you're gonna have a situation where there may not be a meta class simply based on the fact that there will always be some class out there that has tools that you can't deal with. You don't have an answer. Mm-hmm. They can pose questions that you don't have an answer for.
Right.
And so the meta may be having as wide and diverse a selection of classes on your team as possible. That may actually be the meta. May not be a one class to rule them all.
Right. Yeah. And I hope there's not, I hope that it's like Pokemon, you got your strengths and weaknesses and yeah.
Hopefully it's a more complicated version of that system, but yeah.
Times 64,
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I think so far of what we've seen, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, it was the last dev stream of Steven just PvPing with 3 other devs that they were just going through. But you can go ahead and check out that video over at Intrepid on YouTube. But yeah, dude, I think the tanks are generally going to be overpowered based on the abilities. But from what I've seen,
okay, so you think they're going to be overpowered?
I think they're going to be the best class in the game, hands down.
Okay.
Just breeding. I've so far of what the abilities release is, but
okay.
I think the only one that's really going to be hard to get out of the tank's grasp is probably going to be like the rogue, just because he'll be slippery, and a good rogue could probably escape a tank,
Right.
And
but the tanks do have a lot of control abilities. There's no question,
dude.
And I found in a lot of video games, yeah, there's that high mitigation class over there, or there's that high DPS class over there, but they all lose to that high control class right there.
You can't do anything. What are you gonna do if you're locked down? And people are jumping on top of you.
Like going against a control deck, it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect example. What are you gonna do when they fucking destroy all your monsters and control all your creatures and charm all your stuff? And
yes, and yeah, so if they can stun, but they're going to have some type of anti-stun locking mechanic of some sort where you can't just stun them over and over and over again,
right?
Which is what was happening. They were just getting stunned and then they were in stun lock, and it's like, oh well,
that's not fun. That's not fun. Like even me as a tank, I just constantly stun lock you, and I know it's not fun. It's fun for a little bit, but then it gets old real quick,
Yeah. Dark Age of Camelot had a class called the Sorcerer, and that game had stuns, like you think of as a stun, but they also had mezzes.
Oh yeah, Mez is a good one. Yeah. Yeah, that's like an enchanter.
It was 40 seconds long. As long as you didn't
30
take any
seconds,
damage.
Yep.
You just sat there. You had no control of your character. You're just there hanging out by yourself for like 30, 40 seconds, as long as you didn't take any damage. And here's the thing about the Sorcerer. They had AoE mezzes.
Oh, yeah.
So they could hit 50 people in a ball, because people ran around in a ball because it's a Zergfest game. So they could hit 50 people in a ball and just have 50 people completely lose control of their character for 40 seconds.
Yeah.
And so people figured out how to make an assist train where everybody assists the main tank and the main tank just picks the target. And it was just AoE mez, everybody's mez, and they stay that way until they take damage. And then you just single target one down, one down, one down, one down. And that's what the meta of that game became.
Yeah.
So, that was one of my biggest complaints about that game.
That's
so
you had to be
very careful with crowd control. Like
crowd control is very touchy, man.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother episode. Crowd control.
Yes. Yes, it is.
But yeah, so I wanted to ask you. So, do you have a favorite combination? Like, which class you're gonna pick? Because I know you said you're an altaholic, but is there one that's a cut above for you that you're gonna roll first?
Oh, I'm gonna be a tank.
Yeah, I know, but what type?
Oh, you know, like my secondary.
Yeah, your secondary.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
your combination.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to be a tank before I saw what the tank.
Oh yeah. Oh, I figured
I was going to be a tank
dude.
in Ashes of Creation before I knew Ashes of Creation was a game.
I'm being a tank in the next MMO regardless of what the
yeah,
MMO is. You know.
I'm going to tank. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them that interest me. I've mentioned it before, but the fighter. As a secondary, just as your off tank.
Dreadnought, that's one of my favorites. Yeah,
I think there's something cool that it depends on how they do it, but because this is all super speculative. I really like the idea of a tank bard. If the bard works, because we don't know anything about the bard really. But so if it works where the bard sings songs or plays music or whatever and puts out buffs to the team, so it kind of makes like
that's that support tank type. That's cool.
It's the captain class in Lord of the Rings Online. Have you ever played that?
I've played Lord of the Rings Online, but I don't remember. But that makes sense. Well, a captain given inspiration and such.
So he was a tank who gave buffs, and there was like different ones, and so you could read the battlefield and choose. Oh well, we're behind on DPS. Well, here's an offense buff.
Right.
The healers aren't keeping up. Here's a defense buff or whatever, and it could be more complicated than that, and probably should. But so I think that's a good idea. Some type of a captain type of class. Of course, for running around by yourself, it's hard to beat a paladin in almost any game.
I know.
So they're always just godly with their ability to stay alive forever. I think the one that has the most I guess interesting possibilities, like what you could potentially do, would be tank summoner. I don't know what that one's called.
I don't know. It's the keeper, but I don't know how that would really work though.
I don't know how it would work either, but the possibilities are endless. Like, is your pet also a tank? Can he also hold aggro?
Do you have a pet though? Like, or is it summoning like swords or something? I don't know what it would be.
Right. So I've made this joke to my friends a few times. We've all been laughing about it, or I don't know if it's a joke, but they say that the flavor of your primary class's abilities will change based on your secondary class ability. So the one example that they've given that seems like it's already a known is the charge ability. Right. Your gap closer. If you choose like wizard, it goes from you running and leaping to them to like a blink. You teleport to the guy,
which is like huge in PvP. Because being able to catch somebody in a rush versus a blink is like the world difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a world of difference. So I've laughed about the idea of you got the javelin ability where you launch the javelin at a guy and pull him to you.
Right.
Well, what if your secondary class is a summoner and you like literally summon like a giant or something behind them and the giant shoves them and they come flying to you?
Dude, that would be rad. That'd be really cool.
There are some cool, and now who knows how creative they're going to be able to get with that type of system, but there are some cool ideas that you could go with if you start thinking about the tank with a summoner. Do you summon a bear that's just a tank with you, or
that would be interesting? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Is your summon, if you're able to have a summon, is your summon your class? Can you tell it, I want you to be a tank, and then it's just as tanky as you?
Right.
There's a lot of options there. So I would say those are the main ones. Although all of them I have cool ideas about. That tank ranger doesn't seem all that interesting to me.
I don't really know. The only thing I could see is that the tank maybe uses more of a ranged kit.
Range set.
Yeah, range set type of abilities that it's good for. You can't get away from them type, which might be handy.
Yeah.
Tank rogue might be good for evasion.
You might go with an evasion tank, right? Right.
Yeah. So I think that's there. But yeah,
What's your favorite ones?
Dreadnought, yeah, definitely, because going back to the tank and DPS. But I like fighters in video games a lot too. So I was looking at the fighter a lot with the cleric, because I'm not a paladin guy. I've never been a paladin guy. I played a paladin in Diablo, and that was the only paladin I've played. Yeah. So I mean, I just feel like every paladin's such a douche, and they're usually an elf. I'm sorry if you're a paladin, elf paladin, but you got the odds stacked against you in my mind.
Paladin,
Yeah. But I mean, just because of like, you can heal, you're full of armor, you got probably a high health pool, you probably are good against undead or version of that, So I think paladins make really good raid tanks, But
usually, yeah.
But in PvP even they're good, So they're
they're almost always godly in PvP. What they're really godly is solo. Because you're kind of a tank healer and DPS all into one, so you can handle almost any situation by yourself.
Right.
That's where they really are nasty.
Yeah, and also the tank spell sword, or the mage, the tank mage. I think that would be cool too, because that's like a battle type of mage, And when I was playing Skyrim, I ran a battle mage, and he was sweet, man. Being able to just cast spells, and usually it's like harm touches and different things like that, but. You can or maybe you get that fireball from that tank from the mage side, That could be.
Or maybe it's defensive. Maybe you can cast all kinds of barriers, magical barriers and stuff that you don't have available on other classes.
Yeah. And then so we got one more question, and then we're gonna get into the abilities. Sorry, two more questions, then we'll get into the abilities, and then we'll wrap it up. But
all right.
So how do you feel about tanks not being required to wear heavy armor or medium armor in the game?
I'm fine with that.
So you're happy with tank running around in robes type?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's choices, man. Right. Give people options.
Right.
I'm pro options.
I'm a little bit shaky on that. I kind of wish that. Well, they did say that you're going to be more of an asset as a tank if you're in heavy armor just on your AC.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get that, and that's what I'm cool with. But that was just a topic that is touchy and can be touchy for a lot of people. But
have you played Elder Scrolls Online?
Yeah, and you could do whatever you want, dude.
Right. So what they did, and I thought it was a pretty brilliant system for when you're getting into that specific topic. Light armor was more of a magical armor, and when you were wearing light armor, all the buffs that came along with it had to do with magicka and magicka regen. Magicka damage and magicka regen generally. Medium armor was more for your melee, so it had to do with stamina and stamina regen, and then the heavy armor was more about mitigation. And so tanks could figure out what combination that they wanted to wear to get the bonuses that they wanted, and so you could go a little more offensive or a little more defensive.
Yeah. I do like that.
So if they do something like that, where Ultima Online had a similar system where basically your magic just didn't regen as fast if you were wearing heavier armor.
That makes sense.
So you could cast spells. If you had magic ability, you could cast the spells. But if you were wearing magic armor or metal armor, it regens slower. And so there's ways you can go about it where you're not going to have either someone running around in light armor who's ungodly and you can't touch him, or the other way around where you have somebody in metal armor who also does all the damage.
Right.
So give people the options, and a medium armor tank that's a tank rogue combo, tank rogue combo that's all about evasion. Maybe your evasion stat goes down if you're in heavy armor. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or you're slower too,
Right. So you wear the medium armor to get your evasion stat up there. Maybe rogues specifically will have a buff where they get this much evasion if they're wearing all medium armor.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right.
So I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Give people options and choices. And then if something specifically is causing a real problem, change it.
Yeah, that's good. Now that you say that, that makes a lot of sense. And I could see that, like I could definitely see that working in the player's favor. Um,
Hmm.
so last question before we move to the abilities, but what type of weapon do you want to wield as your tank?
Are we taking a raid, or am I running around by myself trying to level?
Your go-to, I guess, because like, and this is just more of a fun question, but I mean,
Right. Yeah. No. It is a fun question. I mean, I've always been a sword and shield guy.
ah,
I like sword and shield.
mm,
Um, and the whole blocking and stuff. But of course, in MMOs, you don't actually actively choose to block except for ESO. So it's
right.
always been kind of whatever.
Mm,
Um, but I mean, as I've gotten, uh, let's say wiser, uh, leveling as a tank is so brutal. It's you kill so slow that I end up running around with a two-handed axe or a two-handed hammer or so, some type of a
just
big
on
two-handed
right,
weapon.
or you got it in
Yeah.
your inventory and you're just waiting to
And you
throw
can
it
swap
on.
to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's a good
general,
option.
if I had my choice, my guy would have a sword and a shield, and then a two-handed weapon of some sort as like his
His
alternate
alternate,
weapon.
yeah, yeah. I would
Hmm.
I would run around probably two-handed sword, and then have probably some type of one-hander with a shield, just because it's probably
Right.
I'm gonna need it,
Right.
just in case I need that extra defense bonus,
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes there's some
Yeah,
fights where it's advantage for sure.
yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get into the abilities, and we'll be right back. All right, now that we're back, so one final question, as we wrap up with the abilities, what is your favorite ability thus far for the tank class in AoC?
Everybody's going to answer this the same. And if they, I'll say this: if they don't, they're wrong. It's fine. Um, it's get over here. That javelin animation is
Yeah,
so
yeah,
awesome. It's the scorpion move. It's got to be for everybody.
yeah. Yeah, but I love the cool thing about this is, and the way it builds is, I love how the abilities, they don't just gain power, they gain like new option or new benefits to the ability. You know, like it goes from a 3 harpoon to a 5 harpoon, you know, and it increases damage with it, and it has like multiple different benefits as you level up that ability. So when you're leveling up your ability as a tank, you know, it really creates that, okay, where do I want to actually spec my tank? It's like that further investigation you got, you know?
Right. I mean, I've said it 50 times. Options.
Yep.
It's given us options. We have different ways we can go about tackling, you know, each boss or each encounter or whatever, based on all these different choices we're going to get to make. And yeah, I'm excited about that. Sure.
Right. One thing though that I found a lot for the abilities is, and I think we've talked about it a little bit earlier, but is the control factor that they're going to have. Like 80% of the abilities roughly has some type of threat builder onto it. So I get a little scared about that just because we're so used to the snap taunting and it's worked so well. It's such a foolproof, not even foolproof, but it's worked very well. But I just can see that as a tank, you might fall short if you don't have those abilities. You know, if you didn't choose those routes, if you didn't level up those particular abilities, that you might fall short as a tank because you need the control, you know? So that's probably my only concern about the abilities.
Well, yeah, but, and while I for the most part I agree with you. Number one, you're going to be able to respec. So if you gimp your character, like you can't
if you mess
gimp
up,
your character.
Right. Yeah, totally. I completely understand. And the fact that you can't gimp your character makes it that much more fun because you can screw up. So you can experiment. You'll know, you know, you don't have to re-roll the character just to be able to get back to where you're at, you know? Right. I do like that. Yeah, I really do like
Dark
that.
Age Camelot had that where you could gimp your character. You needed to have a damn plan when you started that character, and every level you needed to put that point in the specific spot where it was supposed to go all the way to the end, and you could royally screw yourself over if you didn't. And back then they didn't have respec. If you did that, I mean, you could delete the character and start over, I guess. By the way, it's a 6-month grind to 50, so have fun. Yeah. You know.
And then, and then you're not useful in raids at the end and all that jazz.
Yeah, it's awful. So yeah, they got that. I don't think that, like, they are trying to go retro a little bit with the game and go back to some old game design that kind of fell out of favor, but I don't think that they'll do that. I don't think they're going to let you ruin 3 months of
no, I don't think Ashes would do that. I think other companies would, but I don't think Ashes would do that.
Yeah. Pantheon might.
Pantheon will. I think yeah, I think definitely if you fuck up your character, you're gonna pay for it, you know. What my favorite ability, I would say, amongst that reel was Onslaught, and that's when you charge your character. Charge your target provides a small damage absorption shield that generates additional threat, but in the end, the third tier of that ability, you knock people up in your charge path.
Right.
So, and the second one is you hit the target, they knock down. So that's your knockdown, right? You charge them, they knock down. Typical ability, but anybody that's caught in that path is knocked up. So you're really not disabling or proning whoever's in the middle, you know, and then you hit. So if you're a tank and you want to get that healer in the back, or you want to get the mage in the back, you charge his ass. You hit the tank, you hit the cleric, maybe you hit the rogues, whoever's in that line. They're, you know, immobility. I think that's very good for a tank.
You make a really good case, but you're still wrong. But that's okay.
What?
That's okay.
Or you want people pull it?
it's javelin. I'm just
the grab trash. And go. Yeah.
I just javelin's love the animation. For the
javelin's a sick ability, but I just thought the Onslaught was such a cool ability.
I like the Onslaught too. I really liked the way that you like built up speed. So many games, like when you have that leap or the gap closer ability.
That's what
like
it is. Yeah, that gap closer.
Go from standing still to immediately full speed. But with Onslaught, he like takes 3 big steps and then leaps. You know, it's a cool looking ability. It is the second best one. but you're entitled to your wrong opinion. It's fine. It's no big deal.
All right, we're gonna get into some fun facts, and then we're gonna wrap it up. So all classes with the tank as a primary archetype will be viable for tanking upper end raids, so you don't have to be concerned about that. Any tank you do choose will be able to actually raid tank, which is really refreshing because that's not the case a lot in MMOs.
Right.
Tanks will not be forced to have a shield, but will definitely be a viable option. Another really good thing. I particularly don't care for a shield, but I know that it's always important.
Right.
Aggro / hate and threat. If you guys aren't familiar with that term, you can Google it. But basically, what we were talking about before of what gets the mob on you will matter in the game. Aggro is based on a hate table, as we were talking about.
Okay. Have you ever played Final Fantasy 15?
No, dude, that's the one MMO I've never touched. I've
never
never been a
touched it.
Final Fantasy dude. I've never.
Right.
Yeah.
They call threat enmity.
Yeah,
which is another word of saying hate.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're literally like, I need to build up on my enmity table, and I'm like, you got to stop this nonsense,
dude,
man.
That's just why?
Anyways,
why? Just to be different. Yeah, just to be different. Well, there you go. There's another one. Shields, and then what was it? So this is one more. The tanks raid ability allows them to build a wall, and this is for when you're actually in sieges, in big battles. The tanks
PvP.
Yeah, big scale PvP. They can come together. They use their big ability to put it all together, but they build a giant wall. 8 tanks coming together can build a wall that can separate the battlefield. So that's even more like on a strategic front of higher tier, which is cool.
Yeah, when I saw that, my brain like went into overdrive.
Yeah, dude.
Thinking about all the possibilities with that, because it's off the charts. You know what I mean? And I'm like, is there a possibility that the top level PvE like raiding meta will be having a tank secondary on every character, so that you have 8 of them, so that you can literally build a wall and separate off the
I don't know,
the raid battlefield? My mind started going there, and then I started thinking about all the PvP implications, and I was just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, dude. that ability, you really cut the people's forces in half, like if you're fighting 250 versus 250, you cut the 100 in front of them away from the rest of the guys, you kill all those guys, and then now you're 100 men down right away, so
that's really, really nasty. And what's really cool is every class has that.
Yeah.
Every class has something that they do with like for the summoner, they say that if you get 8 summoners together, they'll be able to summon something way bigger than, like your little
Goliath type.
Dragon,
right.
Goliath,
or dragon. Yeah.
So, and who knows what they're going to come up with for the other classes. But, I think that's really cool. And it's definitely going to be game changing. And it's definitely going to be one of those things where the higher coordination that you have in PvP, I think that's the one thing that's going to change or make matter is in so many games, PvP is just a Zerg fest. More numbers wins, pretty much. But
especially those big battles.
Right. Yep. But you start talking about a situation where a coordinated team can cut half the team, the opposing team in half, and deal with them half at a time. And like you start talking about, okay, now coordination and like
coming together,
leadership, and having a plan and a battle strategy. That stuff is actually going to matter, or should. And so that's one of the things I'm more interested in. Yeah, somebody who doesn't really care about PvP that much, this might actually make me go, okay, now I can get into it, because
it's a different ball game then. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not just you killing a bunch of 10-man people, killing another 10%. Not Zerg Fest, like you cut that Zerg in half, and then you're just chopping their heads off.
Can you imagine you rushing against a 75 or 80 guys, and you got 100 with you, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's a wall, and and now
their 30 versus
50.
Yeah, and then you just look back and you're like, fuck. Yeah,
we're so screwed,
yeah. But that makes it also like, I feel the defending a node will be a lot easier than attacking the node. So.
Yep, I do too. I do too.
Yeah, and I want to do a lot of attacking, so I'm gonna have to up my game there.
We'll work on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Last one real quick. Shields will offer a directional block value chance just based on a cone, a directional of the actual shield you're fighting, which is pretty cool. It's not, if you're hit from behind, you take full damage, but if you hit in front of the shield, you'll take.
That's always good. I like that.
Yeah.
Where I've always thought it was silly that somebody that was facing one way and they block
Right.
the attack from behind. It's like that doesn't make any
The rogue
sense.
gets behind, he's still blocking it with his shield. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So the
that's
directional
definitely be
thing
favorite. Yeah. But all right, guys, that wraps it up. Thanks again for coming today. And I'm Plate.
I'm Xillin.
And we will catch you later. Take care.
Bye, y'all.